afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Our focus today is on the Vermont farmers who grow the fruits, vegetables, and berries that we eat. Required Agricultural Practices, or RAPs, are rules for agricultural land management. RAPs are intended to improve water quality by reducing farm runoff or nutrients like phosphorus. The practices are now required for the state's fruit and vegetable growers. Rebecca Gollin introduces us to farmers who are learning to comply with the rules and regulations.
So what are we looking at here?
We are looking at a bucket of chicken poop, except it's dehydrated and stabilized, so it's not.
Jake Mendel and his partner Taylor Hutchison own Footprint Farm in Starksboro.
We are in our 6th season right now. It's about a 5-acre farm, but we just have an 1.5 acres or so in production each year.
The small-scale diversified vegetable farm is on land that was a hayfield.
Unlike a lot of folks who are having issues with really high phosphorus levels, we have low levels of most things, and so our kind of have a blank slate, which is nice, but it also means that we have to add a lot to build our soil up.
Across the Fence first caught up with Mendel over the winter when he was attending a nutrient management workshop for vegetable farmers.
Regardless of if you're small, medium, large, certified, not certified, all farms have to follow many of the same rules.
We're going over some soil science basics, but also just simple calculations to help people figure out how to improve yields on their crops, save money on unnecessary fertilizer, and perhaps most relevant to this time in our state is to comply with the new required agricultural practices.
Becky Madden is a vegetable nutrient management specialist for University of Vermont Extension, one of the sponsors of the workshop. Those new required agricultural practices, or RAPs, that she's talking about will affect small farmers, some of whom were not aware that changes were coming.
So it's caught a lot of vegetable growers off guard because they also have thought it only applies to dairy, and in fact it applies to all farms. For vegetable farms, anybody over 4 acres or $2,000 of gross annual adjusted gross income is required to comply. The folks with 50 acres or more in annual production are really the ones who are going to have to do a full-blown nutrient management plan and subject to inspections.
The idea behind this workshop is to help farmers and service providers get up to speed on what the new rules will mean for them, and get a clear sense of how to put a successful nutrient management plan in place. Presenters from UVM Extension and other organizations also share information about nutrient management, interpreting soil test results, and calculating and choosing the correct soil amendments.
It's a balance between getting the nutrients you need available for your plants and to have them there when the plants need them in order to get sufficient yields, and then balancing that with not over applying nutrients and causing water quality issues. And it comes down to just spending a little more time with the calculator and adding up the amount of specific nutrients you're going to get out of any given material that you're applying, and making sure that they balance correctly.
That we've only applied these bag nutrients, which you can be much more precise in your application.
Spencer Blackwell is a farmer from Middlebury. He came to share his experience of finding the right balance of nutrients for his land.
It's been a pretty steep learning curve. I started out just basically doing nothing and getting insufficient yields. The hardest thing for us was to find a material and find ways of applying it because we didn't have a lot of equipment. So we did a lot of shoveling compost out of the back of a truck and shaking out fertilizers with yogurt containers. And so it's been kind of a learning curve, just the physical application. And then as we've developed knowledge of how to do that and bought the more appropriate equipment, it's become more of an issue of precisely applying the right nutrients.
Blackwell has attended a number of workshops on nutrient management over his career as a farmer. That's helped him and his bottom line.
Ideally, we purchase less and less nutrients and do a better job of cycling the nutrients that are already on the farm and collecting nitrogen from the atmosphere through crops that we're growing. So our inputs become seeds, which are less expensive than bulky materials.
I'm not going to be able to incorporate all of what I learned today in one season, but I can take some.
On her farm in Charlotte, Kathy Wells grows greens, flowers, and ornamental shrubs. She started farming in 2013, coming from a background in landscape architecture. She came to the workshop to learn about what the new rules will mean for her.
I know that down the road I'm going to need to do this, so it just makes sense to start out doing it the right way in the beginning. And if you know what the rules are and you know how to plan for it, then you can incorporate that into your building plan or your processing plan or your planting plan or anything else that you're planning. You can already do it. So then you don't have to go backwards and waste time, money, and or have to forego something because you don't have it.
Along with the workshops, specialists from Extension work one-on-one with farmers to help develop nutrient management plans for their operations.
So we've actually worked with Becky for the last 2 years to develop a nutrient management plan for our farm. So it's been nice to work with her year after year because we can look back at what we've done, see how that worked.
Did we put compost on those?
They've made some changes over the past couple of seasons, and the results are promising.
What have you guys seen so far?
So much food. We've seen way more production than we ever have. We usually over plan, and this year we were like, oh my gosh, we're going to need 4 more restaurants to absorb all of this, which is awesome.
Despite the success, they're still learning what works for their farm.
We can't intercrop the same way that we used to if we're going to be putting so much nitrogen in right at the front. But we've also been able to grow crops that we've never grown out in the field before, mostly spinach, beets, and chard. We've never had a good crop, and we're on our 3rd summer succession of field spinach right now.
One big change for Hutchison and Mendel has been their record keeping.
It used to be that we'd have such spotty growth within a bed that it was really hard to tell what was going on. Was it a nutrient problem? Was it disease? Was it pests? I have no idea. But this year we have a much more even growth, and so we can tell, oh, that half of the bed doesn't look great. Oh, it's because we interplanted that with chard and the other half had carrots, and the carrot half is doing way better. So let's try side dressing the lettuce half and see if it catches up. And so we've been doing a better job of marking, this is where we started the amendment, and what day we did it and how much we put and when did we start to see a difference.
Hey, the lettuce bed is actually already prepped, so.
There's always more to learn. So we're trying to incorporate more cover crop on our farm and having sort of a 5-year rotation where we can leave a whole block of our field in cover crop for a season and kind of break up a pest and disease cycle if that's there, or also add nutrients in without having to bring inputs from outside of our farm onto our farm.
Helping Vermont's farmers comply with new regulations by teaching them to rethink their approach to soil management. It's good for the land, good for the crops, and good for the farmer's wallet. In Starksboro, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Rebecca. Joining me now is Becky Madden. As you saw in the video, Becky is the Vegetable Nutrient Management Specialist for UVM Extension. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Judy.
Tell me a little bit about how the required agricultural practices, or RAPs, work and what's new in there for vegetable farmers.
Yeah, so as we saw in the clip you guys just had, the required agricultural practices do apply to vegetable farmers. And this has been a little bit of a wake-up call for vegetable growers who have, over the years, kind of emerged as an industry in Vermont that's very vibrant and really important to our economy and land base, but have really kind of invented and developed their own nutrient management styles in very unique ways over the years. In terms of complying with this rule, it's new in that they're actually written into the language of the law. The AAPs did also apply to vegetable farmers, but it was a little bit of an unknown whether or not people were actually aware of that. Now it's very much in the public sphere. Vegetable farmers now have to do some very basic things that they should be doing anyway and should help their profitability and efficiency and bottom line. So again, this was demonstrated with the farmers we just heard from, but the main important things are to soil test every 5 years, plan your nutrient applications with regards to the soil test recommendations, and keep records of those applications. Those are the 3 basic tenets that we're really trying to drill into this, break down this rule for vegetable farmers.
Right, and even though, as you mentioned, that these are things that help with profitability.
Exactly.
You're not wasting money by putting too many nutrients on the field. Your yields are up when you pay attention to what you're doing and so forth. So it's actually helping the farmers.
Exactly, and then the other big component to this that we can't ignore is the erosion reduction, buffers, cover cropping. So improving nutrient efficiency on one side and reducing nutrient losses on the other side of that.
It's really learning more about soil science too.
Soil health is really, it's interesting because I'm not a soil scientist, I'm a farmer by training, and I've been learning a lot of the soil science and how the nutrients work in the soils, but also that bigger picture of soil health. And that's really like how we're trying to couch this. And I've taken a lot of inspiration from the food safety stuff that a lot of vegetable farmers have been petrified by. You know, it's this big looming federal rule that came down. And UVM Extension and the Vermont Agency of Agriculture have collaborated really well to turn it into like wow, you can streamline your production systems. Wow, you can create some standard operating procedures to improve your farm. And people have responded so well to this like way to couch this regulation. And we're trying to do the same thing with the RAPs.
How important is it, we saw in the video, an extension agent being able to work one-on-one with a particular farm? How important is that?
I've been finding that to be the most effective way. I mean, we're learning as we go. We've got a lot of wonderful models in extension with who work with dairy farms, like Heather Darby and Kirsten Workman and Jeff Carter and all these. There's tons of wonderful folks. I think the difference with vegetable farmers is there's such an array of practices and ethical, like, you know, I visited a farm the other day and they don't want to bring in any inputs onto their farm. They have animals and they're trying to do a closed loop. So it's so unique that there's no one size fits all. And that's been the difficulty with this regulation, is to try to fit this like incredibly diverse group of people into this package.
Because you were talking earlier, there are hundreds of farms out there.
Yeah. Hundreds and hundreds of all scales and walks of life.
Are there costs or barriers to compliance?
Well, I think the thing we've really been addressing and honing in on is, you know, vegetable farmers need to bring in some form of fertility. If you look at the system, we're exporting our nutrients in the form of vegetables. We need to replace those in order to keep our crops healthy and yielding and profitable. So when I first started farming, it was all about compost, compost, compost. People have shifted a little bit over the years, but they still use the composted chicken manure is the main product, like Jake was using. And it's wonderfully effective. There's another product that he's not using that's actually even more affordable that competes with conventional fertilizers, but it's organic. And the problem is it has almost just as much phosphorus in it as it does nitrogen. So from a simple mathematical point of view, you're trying to meet the nitrogen needs of your crops, you're adding just as much phosphorus. You do that for 20 years, phosphorus behaves differently in the soil, it gets bound up and sticks around, nitrogen, leaches, volatilizes, etc. So that's how we've seen this build up over years, and this is where the cost effectiveness is really challenging to replace that cheap material. There's nothing else. We're doing a lot of research on legume cover crops, which fix atmospheric nitrogen, but there's really no other imported material that comes even close to that, and nothing local. You know, people like that these composted manure-based products are sustainably sourced from a neighboring dairy farm or from a neighboring, there's a couple chicken farms across the lake where we get this. And instead, your next best option is soybean meal. which is a great fertilizer, but it costs 4 to 5 times as much as this composted chicken manure.
So more research is going on.
Yep, we're doing a lot of really the fun part of my job is I'm doing some legume cover crop trials and trying to find out how much nitrogen you can get from them and when. When is it available to specific vegetable crops?
Well, Becky, thanks so much for joining us
Yeah.
today. If you're a farmer, you have questions, you can check out this website. It's uvm.edu/VTVegAndBerry. That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.